Maybe not similar to what you grew up on either. But if you look at diabetes prevalence in Japan, in adults over the age of 40, prior to 1980, very rare, 1 to 5% of the population. Not a lot of diabetes. But what happened to Japan around 1980? The westernization started to occur. And these are not traditional Japanese foods, are they? But they became very popular. And so the fat content of the Japanese diet, can you see this? The fat content was going up. It's not as bad as ours, but it's rising year by year. And carbohydrates started to fall. In other words, they're eating less rice, less noodles, less vegetables, more meat, more dairy products. And if you look at the Japanese waistline, the top line here is overweight. There's more and more of that. The bottom line is obesity. Not a lot of obesity yet, but you get the idea. The population is getting heavier, eating fattier diets. And then if you look at diabetes prevalence, prior to 1980, 1 to 5%. 1990, 11 to 12%. So this shows us really two things. The first thing is the common wisdom that carbohydrate causes diabetes is not right, is it? Because if so, they would have had a lot of it before and none now. It's the opposite. When they were eating starchy foods, they did fine. When the Western diet came in, then they're in trouble. The second thing this shows us is the role of genetics is smaller than we might have thought. And this is sort of like the Pima experience, that the genes are there, but the genes for diabetes are not like the genes for the color of your eyes or the color of your hair. Those are dictators. If they say blue eyes, brown hair, you can't argue. But the genes for diabetes are more like committees. They make suggestions, and you can argue with them. You can say, I don't think I want to have diabetes. And those genes sit like seeds on the desert floor. Nothing happens unless it rains, and then they sprout. So if you're not following the diet that makes them come alive, you may never get the diabetes. Is this making sense?
When we went to the Philippines, and because of my previous training, trying to grow cows better and regarding animal protein so highly, we were led to believe that if you're going to actually feed kids in the third world, one of the most important things is to make sure they got enough protein. And what they generally meant by that was making sure they got enough animal-based protein. Okay? So that's what I did when I first got involved in the Philippine study. But then I noted through sort of happenstance and, as it were, an observation, namely that higher protein intakes, quite frankly, were associated with higher rates of liver cancer in children. We had another project going trying to figure out what really caused liver cancer, by the way.
This is Dr. Mercola, and I have some urgent breaking news to share. This is Dr. Mercola, and I have some urgent breaking news to share. The first peer-reviewed lifelong study on rats consuming genetically engineered corn was published earlier this week in the journal Food and Chemical Toxicology. And what they found was very alarming. For 2 years, rats fed on Monsanto's genetically engineered corn or exposed to its top-selling weed killer, Roundup, suffered from massive tumors and organ damage. France, where the study was done, already bans the growing of genetically engineered crops, and 2 days ago they called for a probe that could actually lead to the European Union intervention, including an emergency ban of all imports of Monsanto's genetically engineered corn. So what caused France to take such drastic action? Well, in this study, 50% of the males and 70% of the female rats died prematurely, compared with only 30% and 20% in the control group. The rats that were fed either genetically engineered corn or the herbicide Roundup had an increased risk of developing breast cancers, suffering organ damage, and dying prematurely. The cancer in the rats, and this is key, did not develop until well after 90 days, meaning that they were missed by almost all the shorter studies required for regulatory approval and always touted by Monsanto and FDA officials as solid evidence of the safety of genetically engineered foods. Remember, and this is key also, that contrary to popular belief, regulators at the FDA do not require independent studies verifying safety before approving the release of these products into our food supply. Genetically engineered seeds are patented use technology, so it is quite difficult, if not virtually impossible, for independent, objective scientists to gain approval to conduct impartial testing without violating these patents and running into serious legal risk. Despite the challenge in conducting this research, there have been over 30 other independent studies that have shown very clearly that genetically engineered foods can be toxic or allergenic, and you can see them further down on this page below the video. Now, what makes this study so remarkable, though, is that it is really the first that was ever done for the entire lifespan of the animal. Now, humans live roughly 40 times longer than these rats, and obviously you will see the effects here long before they emerge in the human population. The real-life experiment feeding Americans genetically engineered food has been going on for about 10 to 15 years, and the 30-plus peer-reviewed animal studies demonstrate very clearly the urgent need for labeling in the United States to allow us to opt in or opt out of this ongoing gamble with our health. The right to know is fundamental. That's why 50 countries, including China and Russia and the European Union, have already enacted labeling requirements for genetically engineered food.